Hi everybody, this is Dr. Hale and I am recording this video as a model for you for the professional resource assignment. Um, so I have selected a professional book as my professional resource. I indicated it on the sign-up wiki for the professional resource. The resource that I chose is from a series of books called Not This But That. The series editors are Nell Duke and Ellen Oliver Keene. It's from Heinemann Publishers, one of my favorite professional publishers. So the book that I chose is called No More Reading for Junk, Best Practices for Motivating Readers. I chose this professional book for several reasons. Number one, I work with a lot of teachers in the schools, as well as my student teachers. My student teachers have this same predicament. They work in schools where accelerated reader is used quite often. In fact, for many of them, they are required to have their students read books that are only on their level, and they have to use those quiz grades as grades in their grade book. And I have very strong feelings about accelerated reader. And so when this book came out, I was pretty pleased to see it because it's an easily accessible book. I'm using a new tool this afternoon. I'm using a document camera that I purchased. It's a portable document camera, so I'm not used to how it works. So you'll see some different things. But when I say it's easily accessible, you can see that's how long the book is. It is, including the references, it's 88 pages long. So not a long book. Easily accessible, easy read. I read it a couple Saturdays ago in maybe an hour and a half. I wanted to have this as an easy reference for the teachers and the student teachers with whom I work. I wanted them to have something to turn to when they have administrators who are pushing them to use accelerated reader or some other program out there that is an extrinsic motivator. Okay. I want to share with you a little bit about the book, and I'm going to do that by showing you the table of contents. So let me see if I can, yeah, that's a little bit better. It starts off with a letter from the series editors. And I'll show you some more about the series in a little bit. So the way the book is laid out, it has 3 sections. So it starts off with a section that is Not This. Okay, so it mirrors the series title, Not This But That. So Not This. The second section is Why Not and What Works, which this is the research behind it. And then the third section is, you can guess, But That. All right. So let me tell you, I'm just going to give you a little bit of synopsis of the book, and I'm going to use the table of contents as kind of my guide to remember what I learned when I read this a couple of weeks ago. So this part by Barbara Marinac, I haven't done any research on this person, but I gather that she's a classroom teacher and literacy coach, and she's kind of talking about what she's seen in her experience. Okay, she's more of a practitioner. So she talks some about the idea of reading for junk or for gimmicks or for rewards is very much a behaviorist model of instruction. I know for me, that's one of the reasons that I reject the idea of reading for rewards. And that even includes stuff like the Book It program from Pizza Hut. I mean, who doesn't like a free pizza? But I would rather kids read for an intrinsic reason. I'm probably much more of a constructivist, and so that's one of the reasons I reject this behaviorist reading model. In this section right here, Counting Ducks, Rethinking Public Displays of Achievement, she talks about when she was working, I think as an instructional coach, they weren't reading for prizes, but for every book they read, they put a duck up on the wall with the kid's name and the title of the book they read. And she realized later how demeaning that was to kids, because if you it's not necessarily about how many books you read. And so some kids who read slower or who read longer books had very few ducks with their names on the wall. And other kids had, 20, 30 ducks. So that's why she looked at that practice. She thought she was doing a good thing, but it turned out it wasn't really a good thing. This section right here, Insights from the Underground Book Club, what she learned by listening to her kids, like in the hallways between classes or at their lockers, was that they were talking about books. It just wasn't necessarily the books that they were required to read. Oh, you can see I'm doing air quotes on the document camera. Or the books that were at their appropriate reading level, that had the right color sticker on the spine in the library. But by listening to kids, she started to see that they did want to read. They just wanted to read books of their choice. And then right here, she talks about creating a motivating classroom context for literacy learning. That, when I read that subheading right there, it reminds me, NCTE has recently posted a position statement on the importance of classroom libraries. And that's one of the ways that she talks about creating a motivating context, is having a classroom library and a school library full of interesting titles for students, and not limiting access to those titles. This second section begins on page 13, and it's called Why Not? What Works? And it's what we know about reading motivation and what it means for instruction. So I know from past reading I've done that this author, Linda Gambrell, she's a former president of the International Literacy Association, and she's a big name researcher in the field of reading motivation and the affective domain of reading. So all through this section, Gambrell talks about the research that's out there, and she names specific study after study after study about what happens when we use rewards or incentives to motivate students to read. So what we know happens is that the kids may read as long as that reward or extrinsic motivator is in place, but once that motivator is gone, the reading stops. Okay, they lose their motivation to read. So let's say you're at an elementary school where they want to use accelerated reader. It's fine, it's great, your kids are reading, that's awesome. But what happens when they leave that elementary school and move to the middle school where they don't use accelerated reader? Then you have teachers who start to complain that, well, you guys said these kids were readers, we can't get them to read anything. Okay, so that behavior that you're trying to shape with those extrinsic motivators drops off. And she cites theory after theory or study after study after study to support that notion. And then she moves into the idea of intrinsic motivation, getting students hooked on the reading habit. So she talks about the research that she and Marinak have done here, and the theory or the ideas that they're posing for how to get students motivated to read intrinsically. And they frame it in terms of what they call the arc of reading motivation. So the A stands for access, the R stands for high interest reading experiences, and the C stands for choice. Okay, so access, high interest reading experiences, and choice. All right, so that she explains all of that in section 2, why not and what works. And the final section, but that, is all about using the arc of motivation to engage all readers. So in this section, both authors talk about specific strategies that you can use to get readers engaged in reading for intrinsic reasons. So for example, under access, recognize your superpower. This one, it seems like a common sense one, but I don't think teachers realize it. When kids see their teachers reading, they see that their teachers value reading. And so they, in turn, will value reading. Okay, we can serve as great models. Basically what it boils down to is We have to be readers, and we have to love reading, and we have to be passionate about it if we want our kids to. That's our superpower. They talk about book blessings. That's the whole idea of anytime as the teacher you talk about a book or you display a book at the front of the room, kids are going to want to read it. Okay, you've blessed that book, and somebody's going to want to read it. They talk about writing personal invitations to kids to read. That's the whole notion of, and you don't have to write them, but going up to a kid who you know and saying, you know what, I just received this book in my scholastic order, and I haven't read it yet. I've read the summary, but as I'm reading it, I'm thinking it's something that you would be really interested in. I know how much you love reading books about dogs, and this one seems well suited for you. That's a personal invitation. How good is that going to make a kid feel, whether they're a first grader or a 12th grader? Okay? You're showing them that you're thinking about them. So they go through several strategies here under access, and then they do the same thing here, relevant reading experiences. They talk about promoting personal enjoyment of reading, so sharing your reading life and asking them about theirs, celebrating students' reading lives, book tweets, having them, they talk about tweets on paper, but using that whole notion of 140 characters to advertise books. With older kids, you could certainly have them tweet about books. Having book clubs, listening actively. So when kids are telling you about their book, be an active listener. And then another activity called Who Knew? And then finally, the C that they talk about is choice, providing as much choice as possible. And there's all kinds of ways you can promote choice. It can be managed choice, it can be complete choice, even choice in where they read. They don't have to sit at their desks to read, okay? And then it gives you some next steps at the end. So that's how the book is set up. So much good information packed into these mere 88 pages. At the back in the references, they have all of the different studies that Gambrell cites in chapter 2 or in section 2. So thinking about how I would share this with teachers. Okay, well, I'm really excited about some work I'm doing this summer and some work I'm planning to do in the fall and how I can share this with teachers. I want to do a book study with a group of teachers on it. I think it's perfect for that because of its length. In fact, I already have a librarian friend who wants to borrow the book after I'm done with this video, in fact, to start reading it over her summer break. I also think that you could take these strategies in section 3 and build some professional development out of that, where the participants are actually your students and you do these different strategies with them. So that's how I would use it. So before I sign off though, I want to share with you some of the other books in this series because I think you'll be interested in some of them as literacy leaders. Okay, sorry for that fast scroll. So here's, if you work with teachers of young children, No More Teaching a Letter a Week. The book is available in paperback, ebook, and then you can also get a print and ebook bundle. This one I actually have on my bedside stand that I'm reading next, No More Independent Reading Without Support. So it's all about silent sustained reading is great, but as teachers we have to provide the support that kids need via conferencing with them. No More Low Expectations for English Learners. What a great one. And they're all same format. No More Mindless Homework. No More Phonics and Spelling Worksheets. There's No More Reading for Junk. No More Reading Instruction Without Differentiation. That one is going to go on my reading list. No More Sharpening Pencils During Work Time and Other Time Wasters. No More Summer Reading Loss. I have a friend who's reading this one right now. I'm probably going to be ordering this one soon. No More Taking Away Recess and Other Problematic Discipline Practices. No More Look Up the List Vocabulary Instruction. Oh, I used to work in a school where that would have been a great book study. No More Telling as Teaching. This one is written by Chris Tavani and Elizabeth Beer-Moj. A former principal of mine, she's retired now, she's reading this one. And I believe she's purchasing copies for some of her interns. So some great books in this series. I hope you'll give it a look.